This video is going to look at just adding a simple bit of form validation to a HTML form using jQuery. There's other movies in this sequence, and we've done various things like create these welcome messages, etc. But what I want to do is just concentrate on this little HTML form over here. So this is in my sample files, and it's this HTML form. It's just got an action of going to this page called Go, nothing special there. We've got an input of type email, it's got placeholder. What is interesting here is I have put this no validate method in, attribute I should say, in the HTML. That's going to stop it from doing HTML5 style validation, which I could let it do, but I want to add my own stylized validation to this. So if that wasn't there, for example, it would allow me to use the required attribute, which would give me some validation, so that when I try to submit that, we get this kind of pop-up message here. That's Chrome doing that, but maybe I want a little bit more stylized validation, so I don't want to do that, and that's why I'm going to set up this to not validate via HTML. So I want my own little stylized message, and I've got a little paragraph that I'm going to drop in here as a class of error, and let's just put that after the submit button. So that is going to appear, well, it's currently hidden. Let's just show you that in the CSS. There is a class for error, which is set up there, so you see it's display none. So this error message, which is going to appear in red and all nicely styled, is going to pop up underneath there. If I inspect that, I can reveal that because it's inside of there. There it is. Let's just switch that off so you can see the messages. That's where it's going to appear. Okay, right, so that's my error message. I now need to build some JavaScript around that. So what we're going to do is we're going to detect when the form, well, first of all, we're going to detect when the user clicks in here and then clicks out. That's what's known as a blur event. So as they click in there, that's the focus event. Click outside in JavaScript, that's known as a blur event. Now the item itself, in terms of the HTML, is this input here of email. So I could use a attribute selector. So we could say if you are input of type equals email. So we can use that fancy attribute selector, and then we could say that on, and then our event would be a blur. We'll then call some function. So let's just put console message in there. Blurred. Right, so let's try that. So I'll just refresh. I get that message every time. So I'll click in here and I go to console. When I click outside, you see it picks up the blurred event as I take the focus, thus it's called blurred, away from the event. Right, I'm just going to get rid of that message because that's going to irritate me every time, so I'll just switch this off temporarily. Right, so inside of here then, now we've got a blur event. What we'd want to do is to check whether we've got a value. So we could say that if color this, which refers to the current object, which would be the email form. So if .val, now val is a helper method in jQuery that's going to retrieve the value. So if there is no value, that's going to be false. So if that's the case, we'll say that our error message .error, so target that with a class using jQuery's magic selecting tools. And what did I choose to do? We will hide it if we have a value, and else if we haven't got a value, we will show it. How we're going to do? We're going to do a fade in. So we'll do a fade in of 2 seconds. Oh, let's do a bit quicker than that. 200 milliseconds. Right, so when we blur on that, if there's no value, we'll fade up the message. If there is a value, fine, we'll just hide the message if it happens to be there. Right, so no value, click outside, that comes up. Put a value in, click outside, that disappears. Okay, so that's one technique. So we've got some validation on, so this is often called inline validation because we're doing it as the user goes through the form. But you generally want some validation when the user hits the submit button as well. So that's what we'll do next. So on form submission, so I'm quite lazy here in this example because we've only got the one form. So in terms of the selector for this, so this is on form submission. So you might want to give your form an ID to be more robust if you've got more going on. But lazily I could just use the form selector. So you probably in reality probably give this an ID. Let's call it contact form. That would be more robust. So let's make that contact form, and then we could say on, and then what we want is the submit event. So when the form is submitted, we'll call this function. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is when the form is submitted, we want to check whether we've got a value again. Now we've already seen that this will refer to the value. So what we could do is we could say if, and then we could pick that up and then retrieve from it dot val. So if we've got a value, great, then we'll do return true because that will submit the form. Else we could say let's show our error message, so we'll fade up our error message and then we'll say return false. So that will stop this from submitting, the event from submitting. Right, let's try that. So I'll go back to our browser and refresh. So there's no value in there, that's just a placeholder, and we get the message. Put a value in and it does submit. So it's sent through to this go page. Isn't doing anything, but it just illustrates that the form is being submitted. Now obviously that's not an email address, so that's not great. I could do with improved validation there. So what I've sourced at this location here is a regular expression. This regular expression will try and validate the structure of an email. So it's looking to see if the email's got an @ sign and if it's got a value after the @ sign with a dot in it. So I need to restructure this slightly. So what I'm going to do then is, before I do the test, I'll put in my regular expression as a variable, and then instead of doing this, we'll just comment that out for now because we're going to have a more robust test this time. And I'll say var sum email, and we'll run it through this regular expression. So first, sorry, let's get our email value into there as a variable just to make life a little bit easier. So that's going to be the value that they've submitted. That's our regular expression. And this should be outside of the if statement, which we'll come to in a second. And now we'll say if some email, and then this is vanilla JavaScript, we'll say search, and we're going to look for our regular expression. And if it is false, then we've got an error. So these two are going to move up to be in there. Else is true, so the logic is reversed here. Right, let's save that. So I just need my curly brace there. Right, let's talk you through that. So we've got a regular expression that you can use to check that an email is structured correctly. That's the email value that's entered into the form. We run that using this JavaScript search method to see if we have a match using that expression with this value. If it isn't, it's going to return -1, so we'll fade up the error message and we'll stop the form from submitting with return false. If all's good, we'll return true and it'll send the form value through. So let's just prove the blur event is still working. So I'll click away, there's no value, type in, and it's happy with that value. But if I submit, it's telling me that's not an email, but if it was made to look like an email of sorts, then it will send it through. Okay, so there are lots of jQuery plugins out there to help you with this kind of form validation, but you can see that you can create your own form validation setups. So just have a quick look if you did jQuery form validation. There's lots of different techniques out there where people have written additional validations, because this is a very common kind of requirement on a web application. So do have a look at those to take things a little bit further.